Hello and welcome to NFT Decree. I'm Barry and today we're going to be having a look at Dark Country, a Weird West two-player card game where the cards and some other elements are NFTs. The game should be relatively familiar to anybody that's played Hearthstone or any of the number of games that came along after Hearthstone. Quite simple in setup, where you do your stuff and swing into the opponent. There's no reactions, which speeds the game up quite a bit. But I'm not going to talk about how to play or get into sort of the basics of playing today. I've been playing a little bit, and oftentimes I'm coming up against opponents that don't seem to have thought too much about their decks. And if you don't think too much about your decks, you're going to have a bad time. So I'm not saying that I am the best player, far from it, but I'm going to talk about a few things on individual card analysis, as well as think about general card game, what's the word I'm after, mechanisms or the general way card games work. Into multiple games, not just this one, because I do think there's a few things in here that don't work quite as well as a very polished and streamlined version. But this is still alpha. A lot of the cards are still being tuned. A lot of updates still to come. You see there, alpha build 0.1.14, so still very early doors. And so let's jump in. So when you start, you're going to have to make a deck. Really, the game should probably give you a couple of starter decks that are well put together, because there's a lot of mistakes you can make as a new player. So let's jump into decks. I've got the 4 main factions here, and then the neutral cards themselves actually lend them quite well to being their own decks. And I'll go over kind of how to put them together at the end. But what I'll start by is just kind of I'll go through every card in the game. I'll say what I think about them. Like I say, I'm not the best player. You know, maybe played 30 games, I don't know. But the first couple of games were quite sad because I didn't really understand what was going on. So to save you some of that heartache, shall we say, I'll point out a few of the power cards at least, and a few of the cards that you might want to think about how do you make room for those in your deck. So when you put it together, you have a more of a competitive experience. So there's the 4 main factions and the sort of neutral cards. We'll go through the neutral cards first, then into each of the 4 different ones. Then I'll show you the decks. So Young Recruit, 0 cost. Anything 0 cost is pretty decent. 1/1, you're getting the same value as you are out of a number of cards that cost 1. Young Bloods, good example there. I mean, exactly the same. Only difference being some of the traits, so Ghost and Native. Now, Ghost doesn't have a massive amount of support, but sometimes it's helpful to have a couple of bodies down. Let's say it's turn 1, you've got your 1 mana. You could play a Young Blood and a Young Recruit. Then your opponent has to struggle to take out both of them. Particularly useful perhaps in decks that are going to use items, and particularly cheap and early items. Having more bodies down early that your opponent can't deal with is useful. But typically I'm moved away from this. I still see a slot for it in a couple of decks, but these things just die very easily. But do hit the board for a turn. The Ritual as a spell, so you're not going to get a body with this one, apart from the Inspire part where you get a totem. So Inspire is a keyword that creates a totem, and the totems buff natives. So the higher up you get the totem, gains more health, gains more abilities, and then when you play a native, they get additional benefits from having a totem out. Now it's not exactly working at the moment as far as I can tell. but that should be fixed in a future update. Certainly they've got at least the plans for it. So in a native deck, you absolutely can get this down. You can keep it in hand until you have a couple of buffs for your totem. So you can get the totem down with a different card. So other cards have Inspire. You get totem down, and then you buff it immediately with the ritual for free. Lets you kind of ramp that out of dangers from removal quite quickly. Last 0 cost card here in neutrals. This one's a Cultist. Cultist, another pretty strong deck out of neutrals. Doesn't do much. Your opponent can come in and kill it, but if it's still around the turn after, then you can swing in for a 2-1, and again it becomes a sort of Cultist Adept at that time on your turn. Difference between 0 and 1, same reason for the young recruit. If you're trying to get cards down to stay alive, then that's quite good. The Cultist has an added benefit that there's quite a lot of buffs. There's a lot of support for Cultists, and they can quite heavily buff your attack and defense values with Cultists. So getting this down on a turn where you're also playing buffs, again, to take it out of any danger zone, can be an additional threat for free. Then the Medicine Shield, I mean, Inspire's useful. I can't remember if I've ended up putting that in one of my decks, but the ability +0/+1, you're better off with an additional body most of the time. So it's the Inspire effect that you're after, but card slots are tight. This doesn't probably do enough. If this was a +0/+3, I'd consider that. That would take it out of sort of board wipe range for a lot of cards. But at the moment, very niche. I've never seen it used successfully. But in part, that's because Inspire and the totems don't work properly at the moment. Young Blood, native ability, native trait, I should say. That is a 1/1/1. This is your absolute vanilla body. Good in a native deck. You wouldn't play it in anything else. What you've also got to think about, what some people aren't thinking about when they're building their decks, is your mana curve. So assuming you get 1 mana turn 1, 2 mana turn 2, 3 mana turn 3, so on and so forth, you need cards to play at every level. You need enough cards in your deck that you're going to draw them for the level they're on. So your zeros are kind of, they don't necessarily fill the same slot as your 1. You really want to see a 1-drop on turn 1, and something like a Young Blood or Hateful Mob or an Adept. And there's plenty of 1-drops here as well, we'll come on to, and in the factions themselves. But this one fulfills the role for natives. You would only put it in a native deck. It doesn't do anything outside a native deck. Then we go on the spell. So Headshot. Any removal's theoretically strong, particularly for 1. But the caveat that it has to have last word can be... What's the word I'm after? Can be... It makes it very conditional, very niche. When something has last word, that's typically beneficial for them. But if you can control when that triggers, you can come out slightly ahead on that one. But in terms of trading a card to destroy a creature with last word, you're usually coming out behind on that tempo-wise. Either they've spent, if they've just straight up played a card, you've played a card to get rid of it, but they get the advantage from last word, it's slowing you down on tempo. So Headshot, I could only see that being, if that was slightly buffed, right, it might have a place. Destroy a creature with last word without triggering last word. That could be a better use for that card, or a stronger version of that card might see a bit more play. At the moment, it's just too conditional, and you're coming out behind them most times there. Even if you're resource trading up, if you kill a 6 cost for a 1 cost, yes, that's good. But again, they're getting the benefit, whatever the last word benefit was. So you're usually trading down on Headshot. Don't think it's a particularly good card. Here we've got the sort of 1/1 for Cultists. It's got a bit of choice for Cultists. Hateful Mobs, decent. If they stay on the board, you can buff them up or they buff themselves up to start with. You can have 3 of these in the deck, and there's a couple of other cultist cards that will generate hateful mobs to your hand, and they're super cheap. You know, if they can stay on the board for a few turns and you can get a couple of them down, they can end up trading up into, you know, higher cost cards, or swinging in for some meaningful damage. If nothing else, it's something your opponent has to deal with, so they don't get too out of hand. But pretty vanilla. The Cultist Adept, again, you know, the choice between these two, there's not too much in it. I'd probably just have the Adept. You know, it comes out turn 1, does the 2 damage. A lot of things that are coming down for 2, 3, 4 even, only have 2 health. So if they want to try and get rid of it, then they're going to have to trade their more expensive card for it. But it's, again, it's, you know, pretty vanilla as far as things go. The Bobcat, and so Beast's another deck archetype that will come out of the neutral cards, and you can pair it with anything really. There's a couple of Beast cards in some of the other factions. Same with Cultists, same with Natives. Not too many Ghosts, but there are some. Bobcat, 1/1, spell immune. Again, just a thing, right? I mean, if you're paying 1, if you assume that for nothing you can get a 1/1 body, when you're paying 1, you want something else with it. So the something else you get with Youngblood is the native tag. Here you're getting the buff. Here you've got slightly better at a 2/1. Here you're gaining the sort of immune to spell ability. It's okay. You know, AG, so Ancestral Guard, have a lot of removal. A lot of people import those kind of removal spells if they can. And being immune to that means they're going to have to at least hit it with a body of their own, taking damage. It's fine. It's fine. 1/1. Like, you just need something that fulfills that role. Spell, Bloodlust. Give all creatures +1/+1 or -1/-1 randomly. I'm not a big fan of anything that's random like this, but there are a couple of times when it's not so bad. If your opponent has a couple of 1/1s on their side of the board, you play it and they all get buffed, so they become 2/2s, but you have something that's a board wipe that does 2 damage. That's fine. Otherwise, it's just such a lottery, and I don't know, you just wouldn't. I can't think of what you would do to change that to make it worth playing. No, I've got no good ideas. That kind of could use a rework. Anything that's random, right, where you can't control the outcome, is good for. You got a trade-off, right? So in any card game, you want a level of randomness that means that experienced players don't totally wipe the floor with inexperienced players. But the better player should still win. Something like this where it's random, it's a bad kind of random, right? It's not helping. It's not helping the player kind of, or the more inexperienced player take on the more experienced player. Playing this is equally bad for them. The RNG elements just don't really work, I would say, in this kind of game. A big thing I hate about Splinterlands is the ability to miss, right? So when you attack a creature and it randomly misses, you know, in a game that's already got very little control, having that additional element of randomness isn't good, and the same thing applies to this. If it was up to me, I'd probably just rework this into something else. I don't know what. It could even be a turn effect. If a creature on your side of the board kills a creature on their side of the board, give it +1/+1. Right, so just a single turn effect, or it could be an item, or could happen afterwards. You know, give all creatures +1/+1 that have eliminated or killed another creature this turn. And that could apply to both sides. So if you've swung into one of their creatures to damage it, and you've died, then you know the advantage is there. But anything apart from randomly, right? Give +1/+1 to all creatures that have killed something this turn. Give -1/-1 to all creatures that haven't. That's a pretty good board wipe on the other side. A 1/1 board wipe for 1. Might be a bit too strong there. It needs some tuning. Anyway, don't play that card. Another Cultist, Fortify, so Fortify's taunt, effectively. The other player has to swing into a creature with Fortify before straight to the life, or any other creature. 2-1, again, if they have to swing into this, you're trading up a lot of the time. Cultist Tag, which is pretty good. This is fine. I'd play this as my 1-drop Cultist if I was only playing one, more than the other two. But I might have a couple of the other ones as well. The Liquidator, so now we're into the 2-drops. A couple of skills here for 2, so 1-2, already fine. Fortify has to be attacked, but Fatal Strike. So Fatal Strike was 1 shot originally, but it does what it says. If anybody takes damage from this creature, it dies. You know what? I've looked at this card maybe 20 times. And for some reason, I've always thought it was this guy that was the Liquidator. But now I see there's a cultist in the background performing some sort of assassination, presumably with a poison dagger. Yeah, that makes more sense why it's a cultist and not like a ranger. Anyway, it's pretty good. Your opponent has to deal with it. They want to deal with it with spell damage, keep some of your other things alive. If they don't, then they have to trade in. They need at least 2 to take it out, otherwise you can sometimes get a couple of kills with it. Very rarely, but sometimes you could take something out and they still have to deal with it on their turn, which is pretty good. Then another ghost here, so Ghost of Gettysburg, increased spell damage by 1. Now this is obviously valued more than some of these other abilities because you get in a 1/1 body with for 2 cost for this bonus, and this is decent in spell decks. I've started to move away from it slightly, but the turn where late game, if you can drop 2 of these in a board wipe, you can get a lot of value from those sort of 8 resources whilst keeping your board alive. So taking it from a 4 damage board wipe to a 6 damage board wipe deals with a lot of threats that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get rid of. Putting these out just willy-nilly, like so, putting these out on turn 2 is not something you want to do because your opponent will just kill them before you get any value from it. You keep them in hand until later, so that it doesn't really fill the 2-drop slot for when you're building your deck for your mana curve. But it is still worth thinking about in spell decks. War Shield, 2-cost item, +0/+2. Again, the values to me on these items are too weak for what they are. Now, Fortify can be beneficial on a, if you've got something there that needs to be, the opponent has to swing into first. But what it needs to happen is it needs to get some sort of value out of that by being able to take a hit or take a couple of hits. So if you put this on, I don't know, anything, like, put it on this guy, Fatal Strike, let's say you didn't have Fortify, you put it on him, cool, they have to swing into it, but the 4 cost still, he'll go on a board wipe, he'll go on a direct 4 damage attack. It's just not enough, and the 2 cost early on is too much for what this is. If this was free, maybe, but what I'd really like to see is some of these numbers going up to take them out of board wipe range and balancing the game for the factions a little differently around there. But never seen it played, wouldn't play it. Does have some sort of use, Fortify, but probably not the card you're looking for. Peasant, stealth means you can't be targeted. At the moment, stealth doesn't work properly either, so you can still be targeted by spells, so it's still pretty useless. If stealth worked properly, and you could get him down and then get an item on it, maybe the next thing we're going to look at, yes, maybe. At the moment, completely pointless. You can't be attacked, but you can still hit by spells and other damage, and even things that mute. So remove abilities can target a stealth creature. See how that works out as the game develops. Not worth playing at the moment. Item, Pipe Tomahawk, +2/+0, and heal the wielder for 2. Never seen it played. Plus 2 damage for 2s, sometimes beneficial, helps you take out something you maybe couldn't before, and might even help you survive. Sometimes your opponent will try and force you into a position where you have to trade, and you're not going to kill them. Getting this for 2 could be okay, particularly if it keeps you alive. Not seen it played, wouldn't go for it as a general rule of thumb, but you might be able to find a slot for it in your deck. 2 drop, 3/2, so you can see the values coming a little more for the natives as you go up the costs. Native, really only advantage to him, like 3/2 vanilla. Yeah, I mean, like he's your 2 drop for natives. You probably have a couple of them in your deck. Beasts, Spiderling, 2 cost, 1/1 Fatal Strike. I mean, Fatal Strike's a good ability. The consideration there is the cost difference. Now, Cultists have a lot of support, and Beasts have some support. What I've found looking through a lot of these cards is some are just strictly better, and not because of the supporting cards that surround them. So, Fortify, Fatal Strike, 1/2 for 2 out of Cultists, which are arguably one of the stronger decks, like top 2 deck in the game, versus the Beast, 1/1 Fatal Strike for 2, doesn't have Fortify, so you don't have to attack it. Isn't as strong, so anything else can take it out. For 1, you can just chud block with your 0 cost warriors or whatever. But the Fatal Strike ability is quite good, and there is a bigger spider that puts a couple of these in your hand, which is okay, but I wouldn't strictly start out by putting these in deck, at least until the board wipe meta is toned down a bit. Skeleton Warrior, Undead. Undead's not really got a like a deck archetype. There are a few undeads. You could mix ghosts and undeads, but they are different theoretically. There's not really enough of them to talk about. But 2/1 for 2. Again, the undead keyword is not... The native keyword is far better than the undead keyword, or trait, whatever you want to call it. And getting a 2/3/2 versus a 2/2/1, useless. But again, these 2 cards can be spawned into hand by other cards, so I can see why they're perhaps undertuned from being cards just themselves. So they're effectively tokens. You would never put them in your deck to start with, but you might get them during the course of a game. The Initiate spell, 2 cost, adds 2 Youngbloods. So if you remember, Youngbloods were this lady here. So you get a couple of them to your deck, and Inspire. Can be worth it in Inspire decks. Decent in the 2 drop slot there again. And also, puts those Youngbloods in your deck. Now, when the totems work, let's say you had a strong totem out, you played a Youngblood for 1, and it ended up being like a 5/5 with Fortify or something, or Fatal Strike even, or just something along those lines, which the higher levels of totems can do. Definitely put this in an Inspire based deck, so a native based deck. Put it in mine. As I say, it doesn't work properly just now, but I could see that having a slot seems balanced fine. Then the first sort of buff cultist here, Mentor 2. So here, 2/3, right? I mean, 2/3 cultist. You could argue native's a slightly better keyword than cultist, but it's not by much, if anything. And what's the word I'm after? I would argue that cultist is a better keyword than native. And you give all other friendly cultists +1/+1. So you've got down your apprentice, you've got down your adept, your hateful mop. You've got all these cheap cultists. They can come down very quickly and buff them with this guy sort of turn 2. So turn 1, you could play this and this. Then on your turn, this is going to be, so you have 2/2/1s. On turn 2, you play this. And so now you've got 3/2s. You swing for 6, turn 2. There's not a lot of answers to that until turn 4. So you get a couple of turns of that going off. Or your opponent's kind of frantically trying to trade to keep your abilities down. And then, you want to add to that even further, sort of turn 3. But yeah, this could have a place. If you're looking at your curve, what you're going to put in the 2 slot for cultists. Probably this guy, and actually probably this guy, but we'll come on to that. Ghost 2, 3, no abilities. The ghost keyword's definitely worse than cultist. I don't know where the balance lies in this one, but if you just need a body, not every card has to be equally balanced, I guess, but I think ghosts are underpowered as it is. This guy could use an ability, just give him something to make it worth putting in. Combat Cultist, 2-drop, 2-1, but the Frenzy keyword, so he's effectively removal. There's no real difference between him and the spell that does 2 damage for 2, other than the fact you do get a body, and if he can stay around, that's beneficial for you. Absolutely, I have 2-3 of these guys in a Cultist deck. They just deal with a lot of things that are only 2 health. You could trade there. Your opponent puts down this Brave, 3-2. You've got nothing to deal with it. You drop this guy, same price. You can immediately attack. So Frenzy is immediately attack into this guy, and you're saving yourself 3 damage. Or you're getting ahead on trading. You can swing straight to their face for 2, and then they'd have to take on you whatever way they wanted to do it. Beast, Coyote, give a friendly creature stealth. This is actually quite good, and when stealth works properly, it'll be better. I think it's fine as is. Just need stealth to work properly. Put it in a beast deck. Gator 2 for the 2/3 vanilla. Again, sometimes you need a body, but wouldn't be my first choice for a 2-cost beast. Spells, Poison Dart. Set creatures attack to 1. Sometimes this is quite decent. It's one of the only ways to deal with the Owl Bear turn 2. There's nothing that's going to get rid of that more easily other than, say, a Lethal Strike. What's it called? Fatal Strike. So this will save you a little bit. And other sort of very high power creatures, sometimes that's good. If you spawn a Poison Dart off some of the sort of spell generation things, it's not too bad. I think it's fine. Doesn't kill a thing. Set an attack to 1. You still got to deal with it. Can still be buffed. Can still have items played on it. I wouldn't go for it I wouldn't put one in, but I'm not. You might be able to find a slot for it. The Ancestor's Necklace for 3. Your totem gains +1/+1. I mean, that seems literally terrible. Like, I can't see a reason why you play that. Now, your totem typically doesn't have any attack. So giving it +1 attack so it can do something, so what? Because it's also got root, right? So it can't move. I can't swing for an attack. 3 cost is way too expensive. It needs to do something else. Like, this needs a rework. You would never play this. Grave Worm Monster, right? So body made out of worms. Nice. Guardian, yeah, it's okay. So Guardian means it can take a hit. It's effectively got a shield. Take a hit before it takes any damage. Can be okay, particularly if you're trying to keep something alive for a couple of turns. If your opponent only has 1 creature on the board, say, and you drop this, and they swing in, they can't deal with it, you're going to get a hit back. If you need a body on the board for the next turn, this is a reasonable shout, regardless of what deck you're playing. I'm going to murder how you say this, I guess. Hui Shivo. 3 cost, 3/2. Root. So Root is Root's a pretty interesting keyword. You can choose a creature to be rooted, and rooted creatures skip their next attack. I think that's how it works. I don't think it means root itself, but I think the the keyword root means you target a creature to be rooted. So if you're really struggling, again, if owl bears, like if they drop at turn 2, you've started, turn 3 you drop this, gives you a turn to deal with it. I'd almost rather root be permanent, or affect, or have a sort of root 1, root 2, root all type ability. So there's a couple of root all cards, but sometimes you just need to buy a turn. But there needs to be a little bit more control in some of the other factions, other than Ancestral Guard. Root's okay, but sometimes the board presence builds up, and if you're not Ancestral Guard, you just don't have access to anything that's going to keep their board down. Maybe. I've never seen it played. Might be okay. Mothman, give your totem +0, +2. Mostly pointless. There's other things you can play that's going to buff your totem anyway. 2/3 body, does a thing. Slightly better than some, right? I mean, it doesn't have any tags. Again, wouldn't play it. Wouldn't even play it in an Inspire deck. I'm sure people out there will tell me I'm wrong, but it is what it is. Then Cultist, Renegade. That should be Renegade, I would imagine. A few typos throughout the cards as well. Again, that'll be fixed. This is good. Last word, summon a Cultist Adept. So if your opponent's trying to keep your board down with a board wipe, say, which is moderately expensive, should be getting more expensive in the updates, then you've still got a body on the board afterwards. So Cultist Adept, if you recall, was the 2/1 guy here. So he's pretty good. I definitely put a few of them in the Cultist deck, 2 or 3 again. Another Cultist, Night Priestess, 3 cost, 2/2. Whenever you deploy another Cultist, this gains +1/+1. So you can take her out of sort of danger range relatively quickly. So let's say it's turn 4. You've got 4 mana. You play her. You've kept your apprentice in your hand, and you can get down a hateful mob or something else there. This guy, this guy's probably quite good because of the fortify ability. That puts her into the 4/4 range. Now that's still board wipeable, particularly if we're at 4. But it does mean it has to be dealt with kind of there and then. Could get out of hand quite quickly, and 3 cost for a 4/4 is not too bad, even though it needs the support to be there. Sacrificial Dagger. This again doesn't work properly. 3 costs for +3. Now, sometimes getting those pluses on the attack to be able to take out an opponent's card is very useful. So I'm not entirely convinced there needs to be massive buffs to the attack side of most of these items, but definitely some on the defense side. And whenever the wielder kills a creature, put random cultist to your hand. If you die as part of that attack, you don't get the cultist. And since that's the only time I've ever done it, I don't know if it even works at all, but this could be useful. Sometimes you're running out of cards, particularly as cultists, and the more you have the better. This could be useful on something a bit bigger. You start swinging into low value creatures and to build up your hand again. Could be good. Then Beast, Scorpion, Fatal Strike, 3 cost, 1/3. Typically, people are only ever going to swing once into a Fatal Strike creature. They're going to wait until they can do all 3 damage. So the 3 is probably not enough, right, for a 3-drop. I mean, this might as well be a 2-drop 1/2 or the 2-drop 1/1 Spiderling. There's no real difference. I guess it means that you can't trade a 1/1 for it, but there's plenty of other ways to get sort of 3 damage on an attack. So not that useful. I'd probably keep the Liquidator in over this, even in a beast deck probably. Then another cultist, vile recruiter, add 2 hateful mobs to your hand. So this is good. If you're playing the hateful mobs, which I wouldn't always do, getting another couple to really buff them up's good. Plus the let's talk card advantage now, if you're unfamiliar with the term. So card advantage is to do with effectively, it's not just, but includes basically how many cards you've got, right? So the more cards you've got, the more choices you have, the more things you can do with them, the more likely you are to win, right? If your opponent only has 4 cards that they can play throughout a game and you've got 10 cards you could play, chances are you're going to win that one. Now, there's a second thought behind that, which is virtual card advantage. Okay, so that's to do with the quality of the cards in your hand. So let's say I was to give you 10 0-drop 0/0s, right? Your card advantage might be significant, but your virtual card advantage, you'd be as well not having those cards, right? They don't do anything unless you can find a deck that, you know, massively buffs those other cards. So here you've got a double advantage of you're playing 1, you're getting 2 cards, and because they're both cultists and you've got all these other buffs you've got access to, and they buff themselves, your virtual card advantage is also pretty decent. So this is a pretty good card to have. It doesn't always make, I wouldn't say it would always be good for every cultist deck, but actually for a 3/2 and 2 other bodies, it's not bad. It's something to consider if you're making a cultist deck. You could consider it if you're making another kind of deck. Vortex, 3 for a 1/5. Pretty good because it's also got this deploy ability. Attack a creature multiple times until one of them dies. Now you're not going to send it swinging into a scorpion, but you might send it into, well, you could send it into this guy, right? You would trade that there if that was advantageous to do so. But there's some other cards at very low hit points that do reasonable damage, like say a 4/1. You could swing into that once, you'd come out still alive. You could swing into a 4/2 twice, and you'd kill it, and because it's a removal spell again, right? So you're removing anything that's probably 1, 2, maybe 3. If you're particularly lucky, let's say it was a 2/3 creature. You swing once, down to 3. You swing again, down to 1. You swing again, dead, but so are they. So can do a lot. It's good removal for factions that don't have a lot of spot removal in their deck. So similar to Frenzy, but this has to happen on deploy, and you can't use it for... Frenzy is more versatile because you could swing at your opponent's face, which obviously brings you closer to winning the game. Beast, Wolf, trigger a friendly creature's deploy. Target is chosen randomly and wolf can't be targeted. So depending on what's down, you might get something off of this. Can be good, and you can probably set it up to be good. The only thing we've seen obviously is the coyote here. Did I say that funny? I feel like I said it funny. Coyote. Drink some water. To give a friendly creature stealth. So let's say that was on the board. You played the wolf. It would trigger again. You could target the wolf. That's all fine. But there's some other deploy effects on beasts that you might want to set up. So this is decent. 3/2, and you can trigger a larger creatures or a more significant deploy ability as long as you set it up to do so and there's not multiple. Again, the random elements may be unnecessary. But then again, I've not really looked at it. It could be that it's too strong if you're able to choose what deploy ability to do and you had multiple. Particularly as new cards are introduced further down the line, so this is probably balanced fine. The Navajo Skinwalker, native, 3 cost, 2/2. You can destroy a friendly creature to gain +2/+2. It's okay. Going straight up to 4 is decent, and you should be able to get advantages off your totem as well. For 3 cost, you You can kill the young recruit, you can kill a young blood, something else that's done its job maybe, and get +2/+2. Then with the totem out, you might immediately take it into, you know, +2/+2 again, so into 6/6 range, which means you're mostly out of the spot removal and board removal range that your opponent might play on turn 4. Yeah, worth considering. But again, giving it up let's say you were to do it, so you got young blood on the board, make sure you swing first to get the 1 damage to the head, assuming that it's not going to kill them, before you drop this, because you want to get the most advantage, right? So another concept in card games, tempo, and that's things you want to be doing with your temporary resources, right? So if you assume that young blood is a temporary resource which is going to become a +2/+2, the most you can do with it is swing for 1 to your opponent's face first, and then destroy it to get that +2/+2. A lot more to be said on tempo, but if it comes up, it comes up. Then your cultist, Fury Rider 3/3/3, and your other cultists have +2/+0. So again, this is, I don't know, it's weird, right? I mean, you've got no, I suppose it's not. I suppose we've got everything. I don't know how that's balanced, but this is good. You know, you built up a board. Maybe you've had a couple of turns via recruiter. You drop down 4 hateful mobs. Your opponent can't deal with it. You drop this guy, and then suddenly you're swinging for 16 in a turn. And that could be turn 5, turn 6. By the time you built up that board. And similar to items and similar to spot removal, this is good because suddenly you can do more damage than your opponent anticipated. Bearing in mind that when you drop a creature, you can't attack with it on the same turn, generally, if it's not got Frenzy or some of these deploy effects. So being able to do more is the real advantage of both items and buffs like this. So this is a pretty good card. You might want a couple of them in your toolbox for cultist decks. Then this is pretty much a native only spell, right? So Blessed Roots, Inspire, so puts your totem up a level, and if you have 3 natives on the table, Inspire again. So quite easy. Obviously these work, you know, this is a numbo, right? You know, if you're wanting 3 guys on the board and you're playing this guy and he's destroying one of your natives, not so good. But you probably want a couple of these in an Inspire deck, just to push that totem up as much as you can, or get the totem back on the board if it's been destroyed. Still in the 3 drops, Executioner, Cultist, 2/2. When you deploy, if every creature in your deck is a cultist, they cost 1 less. So this is a permanent effect, doesn't matter if he dies or not afterwards, but can reduce the cost of your cultists, and by the time you played a couple of them, quite significantly. I'm not 100% sure this works. I think it does. What you need to make sure then, of course, is I think they cost 1 less to a minimum of 1. They might they might cost 0. Not 100% sure. And similarly, you need enough draw and card replacement effects to be able to continue to pump out these cultists. So we'll come on to a bit more on draw and stuff as we move up the cards here. Decent. Worth thinking about in a cultist deck, but obviously then it has to be a mono cultist deck. If there's any other trait that you wanted to include, then this guy suddenly becomes just a 3 cost for a 2/2. No good. Right, still in 3s, item Blood Dagger, +2/+2, and gains +1/+1 every time it hits the hero. This is okay, it's starting to be a little bit better item wise. You got to assume that you're paying 3 for a +3/+3. At least on the defense side, you know, you swing for +2, becomes +3. If you can stay alive again, then you know you're swinging for +4, so on and so forth. Could be okay. Spending 3 on an item though is items themselves are a little bit underpowered, or underwhelming at least. They might not be underpowered, but when you can't guarantee to have a person on the board, primarily due to AG's board wipes, putting cards like this in your deck feels bad moments, even though they're quite good if you've not got anybody to put them on that's going to stay alive. Now you could combo it, I guess, with something with Frenzy. So you drop a Fanatic, you put Blood Dagger on it, swings in, immediately gets that buff. But then, then you need 6 mana, so you're on turn 6, and there's other things you probably want to be playing typically. But something to think about. I've not played it. You might find space for it. Right, Beast again. The theme, Myth Money Penny. The same problem I have with Fatal Strike. Like, it doesn't matter if that's a 2, right? Because anybody it hits, it kills. The only thing it matters for is if it's muted, alright, and so loses the Fatal Strike ability. But again, this is no different than a 1/2. So what's the point, right? I mean, there's already 1/2s for cheaper. So I guess if you really need more, that's the only reason you pay for it. So underwhelming. Black Cat. So Black Cat you'll see quite a lot, not necessarily from people's decks, but another card that spawns them. When this creature dies, it goes back to your hand. Last word ability. Blessing and a Curse, and you got more than one of them, to be fair. Sometimes they'll go into your hand. Cost 3, so it's not cheap for a 1/1. But they can also clog up your hand. So let's say you had a few of these. Let's say you had 3 of these on the board. Your opponent kills them all. They all come back to your hand. Takes you over your 10 card limit. You draw a card and it just goes straight to your graveyard. I wouldn't play this. I wouldn't put this normally in my deck. Probably avoid. Cultist, Dire Witch, 3/4. So you're already into the slightly better stats for 3 drops here. And whenever your hero takes damage, summon a 2/1 Cultist Adept. So the inconsistencies on whether it tells you whether it's a 2/1 Cultist Adept or just a Cultist Adept aside, and also summon rather than summon. Is that a no? I think it's a no, isn't it? Can I click on it? No. This is okay, has to be dealt with before you get any damage to your hero, because what they don't want to be doing is building up your board. Again, they might not care, right? If they've got a board wipe that does 2 damage or 4 damage even, they might just do the swings and then board wipe. Similarly, if your board's quite big and they can't come out, also something to not consider. But this is okay, something worth thinking about in a Cultist deck. Could be worth thinking about in some other decks, just because of the board advantage that taking hits to the face might generate. Then Evoke, spell, draw a random native from your deck and inspire. So this is okay-ish. I prefer it if it was cheaper. Getting a draw, it replaces itself, right? So you paid for 3, you get a card back, you're no further forward. So it's 3 for inspire, as opposed to just playing another. Whatever card this is, when you draw it, it's taking the place of another native. So this is only good if you've really tuned your deck down to the natives that you want. Maybe not even a pure native deck, maybe there's only a couple of natives in there and you really want to see it. If you've got three of the higher cost natives and you need to see it, Evoke might be a choice just to effectively have more copies of the card in the deck. But I can't see where that would be super exciting for anybody, particularly not anybody playing a normal native deck. At 2 cost, maybe. It's not exciting where it is. Another Cultist, Fanatic, or Fanatique. 2/1, Frenzy, and the deploy ability to mute target creature. This is really good. Again, the spot removal with the Frenzy, 2 damage, and the mute target creature just turns off a whole bunch of abilities. So you could turn off this ability, and then swing straight into the hero phase without having to worry about it, as well as loads of other abilities that trigger on damage or end of turn, anything along those lines. Definitely put them in not just cultist decks, but anything that's struggling for spot removal. Into the 4 cost now. Undead Centaur. 2/2, but summon a centaur for every centaur that's died this game. And I presume that works on both sides. But this isn't useful enough that both sides are ever going to be playing it. Undead can have some advantage from having a lot of bodies and a lot of things coming back. So it might have a space in some undead decks, but it's not really that good for 4. The first one you play, it's a 2/2 body. The second one you play, assuming your first one's dead, is 2 2/2 bodies. And the third one you play for 4 is 3 2/2 bodies. And there's other things you can do for that. Still Beast here. So Sarcophagus Beast. 3/3 for 4. Pretty much what you might expect is standard. With a deploy effect to destroy a native and gain +2/+2. Now I presume that's conditional. I've never used this, but if your opponent's not playing natives, it's just blank, right? So this is an interesting choice, interesting card. Can keep power decks in check, I should say. Let's say natives became the meta, and you wanted to play something else, you could put this in. In fact, if you want to play natives yourself, you could play this to do it. And in fact, yeah, you could play a 1/1 native yourself. It's not destroy on your opponent's side to get +2/+2, but that'd be the only way you'd guarantee getting that off. And I'm not excited by that either. Then the Navajo Witch, native 4 cost 3/2, give a target creature Guardian. So this is, again, if you've got a few more items, Guardian's quite good because it helps keep things on the field for an extra turn. They can take a hit, they can avoid a board wipe. Let's say you've got Fortify and you want to protect something from a board wipe. You can drop Guardian on it. It's okay. Guardian's not a particularly great ability, I don't think. If Guardian refreshed every turn, that would be something. Again, you have to check that for balance. But being able to block 1 hit's okay-ish, but they could swing with a chump into you and then go in to kill you. Typically it's not that strong. Ghost faction here, 4 Dream Women, 3/3, kind of what we're expecting here. Destroy target creature's items. Now there aren't a huge amount of item decks, right? What I was saying about items being a little bit underwhelming is seems to play out across most people's decks. There's not a huge amount of items, but again, if we're saying that these ones are keeping certain decks from becoming too powerful, should they, as more things come out and as people do it, I think that's fine. I think that's fine for what it does. Wouldn't play it at the moment, but the option's there if you ever come across sort of item heavy decks. Then another native, Shadow Warrior, 4/1, so quite weak, but got a decent hit on it, and gains stealth when another native is deployed. Useful because stealth can be removed with some abilities. Obviously, if mute turns it off completely. But if you played this, you want to play another one straight away because obviously the 1 damage, the 1 health isn't good. And again, if you compare other things into the the same cost bracket here, I'm going to look immediately at Dark Priest after this. The native keyword is not any better, and the stealth ability is probably not better than just this guy, right? And again, not everything has to be better or worse or whatever, but this could use a little bit extra. Maybe it should start with stealth and gain stealth when other natives are deployed or something. Just try and keep it alive for that turn so you get the value from it. Because at the moment, if you put this down, you've got no support, then it's just a terrible card. Dark Priest, this is probably one of my top picks for cards. Like, if you could fit this into anything, I absolutely would. 4-cost Cultist. Try saying that 10 times fast. 4/4 body. Brilliant, you know, for what you're paying for. And then at the end of your turn, deal 2 damage to the enemy hero and add them to this creature's hit points. So, on the turn you drop it, you're going to do 2 damage to your opponent's hero, and it becomes a 4/6. And being a 6 cost takes it out of a lot of board wipe range, forcing your opponent to invest more cards into getting rid of it. And get rid of it they want to, because otherwise they're taking 2 every turn, plus the 4 that it can swing for. It's really high value for quite a low cost. If anything, maybe slightly overtuned. But actually I think it feels fair. Feels like the sort of level that a 4 cost should be at. Other things might need to be brought up to be similar. Then the Executor 4. Now the hesitation there was between Executor and Executor, along with Vader's ship. What was it called? I've always gone for the Executor, but you never know. And here the difference between this, right? So root target enemy creature versus this thing root. So this has root, in which case this is fucking terrible. Like, if this can't attack and it just sits there, it's got no traits, doesn't trigger off anything, there's no way it's surviving the turn to attack the turn. In fact, it wouldn't even matter, right? Root only lasts till the end of the turn, or lasts for 1 turn, unless the no, because there's no trigger point that would make any difference on that. So I don't know what the fuck that does. I've obviously taken the swearing route now. Adult content, right? So root target enemy creature on deploy. I mean, should this be the same? Should this be deploy root target enemy creature? The wording is not great on this yet, but I'm sure they'll get there. For 4 costs, it's not brilliant. Root, I'd probably want root 2 target enemy creatures. Because this isn't doing that much itself, so you're probably wanting to stall. Although I don't know what else you might want to play. So 4 cost out of other factions, you can get 4 damage to the board, right? So this has to do more. Excuse me, just drinking water. Although the 4 cost of the board doesn't get you a body as well, but similarly, you're not killing anything with this. So root 2 target enemy creatures. That'd be enough to give this a look in. Then Mountain Lion Beast 1/1. Well, that seems terrible, but deploy, gain +1 attack for every enemy card, for every card in your hand, and +1 defense for every card in your opponent's hand. Now this comes out turn 4, or maybe even later, but typically there's only going to be a few cards down. Your opponent might have drawn, or might have generated cards or spawned cards into their hand. This can be quite powerful. It could be like a 6/6 potentially, turn 4, and actually even late game it could come out bigger, depending on what the decks do. If they've gone for the draw, if they've gone for the card generation, there's a lot of things that could buff up both your and your opponent's hand size. So Mountain Lion's a decent card out of Beast, worth considering if you're building. Well, fits into any deck, but if you're building a Beast deck, you can't include it. Ironclad, this ship here. I don't know how. I mean, that's very modern battleship now I look at it, much more than the Weird West. But I guess you can get away with it. If you can have giant mechanical spiders and Wiki Wiki Wild Wild West, no reason you can't have a battleship, right? 1/4, spell immune, so avoids those board wipes, and fortify means you have to attack it. This is okay. There's a couple of decks that really want fortify, might fit into there, but otherwise I wouldn't necessarily. It would be my first choice. there's probably a few things that it works well against. Certainly, as I say, some of these sort of things are anti-meta calls or meta calls. Spells are big. I would say, Ancestral Guard and Spell Decks have a pretty decent impact. This is a decent shout in the meta. If things change, the value of it might decrease, but you can at least consider it. Still in the 4s, Granny. 2/3 deploy, put target friendly creature back to your hand. So you're looking for something with deploy effects that you want to pick back up and play again. The only real issue with that is there's not that many things with deploy effects that I'd want to spend and Granny to pick up and go again. And if there's a couple of pretty expensive cards that might benefit from this. But you'd be so late game at that point that you'd rarely get there. But if you've got something tricky, you can think about it. But you're looking for something with deploy effects. You're not typically using that to save a creature or whatever, right? Because there's no countdowns. You never know what's coming. But I think 4 cost is fine for the unusual effect. Could work in some decks. I don't know what would work in. Another item, Battle Necklace, +0/+4. Yes, I think that's fine. Deploy your totem gains +3/+0. No real point. Totems are permanently rooted. Actually, are they permanently rooted? I've seen a lot of these pluses, so I don't know why they... Is that just to defend themselves? I'm pretty sure they are permanently rooted. Either way, the 4's too much. If this was... I mean, you got the secondary effect, right? But that only impacts one particular deck, really. If this was 2 cost for a 0/4, even if that was the secondary effect, maybe. Because all you're really wanting is that +4 to keep something out of danger range. Things that you need to keep alive for a turn. Yeah, could be. Like, I wouldn't even be terribly upset. No, one for 4 is too much. Two for 4 seems much more reasonable to me. Forces you to find either answers for something big, or it keeps some of your smaller things alive so you can get engines going. The Offering spell, draw 2 cards. If you're not AG, and even if you are, this is mandatory 3 off. Put 3 of these in your deck. Any deck you're building. This is the first thing that goes in. You need draw. And whilst it might not seem like that good a trade, 4 for 1, and if we who was I talking about the Evoke, you're 1 for 1 there. You're just going to run out of cards, and you're going to be sad about it. So the Offering somewhat goes some way to mitigating that. Excuse me. Anyway, you absolutely need 3 of these. You can't play a deck without them. Put them in. Plague Doctor. Again, this is sort of checks and balances for Fatal Strike decks. If you're able to put this down, then you can take out some of the Fatal Strike guys that now don't kill you. Pretty good. You wouldn't play it at the moment. Fatal Strikes aren't that prolific that you need to. But something to think about if they become so. How long have I been talking? My throat's starting to kill me. Headless Horseman, 3/3, Ghost, 4 cost. Absolute vanilla. In a Ghost deck, there's no support for Ghost, right? There's no point in being a Ghost. You can maybe get them for 3. There's a card that drops the cost of Ghosts, but even a 3 for a 3/3, you're already getting that in some decks, right? I mean, what's the advantage to playing someone else? Like 3/3 with ability. Terrible. Needs to do something, or needs to be cheaper. Burning Cow for 5. 4/1 stats, but has Frenzy. This is pretty good. 5 cost for a removal 4. Similarly, if you've got late game, you get this and an item like this. So for 7, suddenly it becomes a 6/3 and then a 7/4 for the end of the turn. You can do a lot of damage with that. Frenzy again is just, you should look at it as spot removal, taking care of something your opponent thought was safe for a turn. The Buffalo Beast, 5 cost, 3/5, Fortify. This is quite good. You could play it out of decks that won't Fortify. You could also play it out of Beasts. 5's the number where your opponent has to put a couple of resources into getting rid of it, or spend more to get rid of it. So this is fine to put in whatever deck you're thinking of. Another beast here, so Altamahaha. Altamahaha. Did I say that? 2/7, +2 every time this creature gets damage. The 7, you think you're going to get the damage going off, but it's often not as good as you think. Sometimes your opponent, let's say your opponent has to invest 2 cows to get rid of you, or a cow and a lightning bolt or something. Yeah, you're trading up, but you're rarely getting the +2 damage to do anything. So you can try it, but I don't think it's that good. The Sphinx for 5, 4/2. Now that's pretty weak stats for a 5-drop. Too many things would kill it. But when it dies, it replaces itself with draw a card. So if you're just trying to establish board presence without losing too much tempo, then this could be okay. Now you put it down, either they have an answer and you get a card back, or they don't and you get a swing off, and it's okay. Again, I've never really seen it played, but the draw a card ability in decks that are really struggling for draw might be okay. The Scorched Treant, destroy enemy totem, right? So 4/6, 5 for 4/6. Okay, that's not too bad. Destroy enemy totem only works really against the native deck. The other decks might end up with a totem through random spells and stuff, but they don't do anything, so it's pretty useless ability. Again, it'll keep in check some totems, some native decks if they get out of hand. The Swamp Witch, 1/2. Right, so here's a great example of things that just don't make any sense, right? Why would you ever play this, no traits, 1/2 body, over a Widow, 6/4, no traits, and they both do exactly the same thing? There's something wrong with these, right? These have to be getting changed. And they're right next to each other as well. So this has to be a 2-drop maybe? Like if this was a 2-drop, okay, that's fine. Turns off some abilities, makes sense to me. And then same with this guy, right? So he doesn't quite do the same thing. So native got a tag on him, fine, that might be worth something. Spectral Warrior, fine. Mute target creature. So the difference there is you can mute your own creature. These target enemy creatures. I don't know why you'd want to mute one of your own creatures. Not very many things have negative impact, but these 3 cards are all weird. I'd almost get out of that, right? Because if you're getting the Inspire effects for this guy, sure, maybe his base stat should be a little lower, but this makes no sense. Then the Sacred Spear item, +3. So as I said, all the pluses are generally fine. It doesn't really matter what you're paying for them. It helps you take out things that your opponent thought you couldn't take out, which is good. And inspires each time the wielder attacks. Again, missing the D. I don't know. I never managed to get this off. Could be okay, but you only get 1 attack a turn, and then you whatever you put this on becomes a target. So it's really, +3 for a turn and Inspire, which 5 seems a bit much. But again, if your opponent can't deal with it, you're going to get more value out of it. But there's a lot of ways of dealing with individual creatures. I don't know if that should be Bait or B-A-I-T, but Ghost. Could be pronounced different, but hey. 3/4 has 3 on it, so 6/4. When something's swinging into it, I would argue that's less good than it being +3 on your turn, but it does make it so your opponent doesn't necessarily want to put an attack into it. Again, ghosts are a bit underrepresented, so if you're struggling for ghosts, could be alright, but I wouldn't go for it. I wouldn't put a lot of them in. Maybe 1, maybe 2. Widow we just discussed there. If you're going for one of these and you don't need the native trait, Widow's the one to go for. Absolutely no reason to go for anything else. The Treasurer, another buff to cultists, 2/2. 4/4, and gives other friendly cultists +2/+2. He's a good one to drop down. Suddenly your board is much harder to deal with if you can get a lot of cultists out. And there's a couple of things that will help you get cultists out as well. Sometimes he can be spawned from one of the other cultists as well, and he's pretty good. Free Rider. This deploy ability is pretty much worth it. Sometimes you just need that one last damage to finish something off, or you need to do 1 damage for something like Banshee, which we'll come on to. Any kind of spot removal, even if it's pretty weak, like 1 damage, is good, and definitely fits into a native deck. Probably not going to pay 5 for just this, but yeah, if you got slots for natives, I'd put 2 or 3 of this guy in. Pale Nun, 5 cost still, 3/6, which is pretty good, and put target enemy creature back to its owner's hand. Now, that's okay, it's an interesting effect. It can slow your opponent down slightly, putting things back into the hand, but the cost benefits depends, right? I can't think of many cards you want to return to your opponent's hand that isn't, that's going to hurt them significantly. Either they get something back that costs a lot, fine, takes them another turn to play it out, but most things that come out that are high cost have some sort of deploy effect or some sort of additional effect. So the situational, if you're coming up against something you don't know how to deal with, and you've got, the 5 resource slot, Pale Nun's an option. Grave Ghost costs 1 less. So again, I imagine this works similar to the Cultist guy, and this is a permanent effect that once this is out, all your ghosts cost 1 less. But 5/5 with an ability, 100% goes in the ghost deck, but isn't that useful elsewhere. Hanged Lady, 2/7. She does the same thing as the Vortex. Attack creature multiple times till one of them dies. She can take on things that are a bit tougher. Again, it's spot removal, same like Frenzy. You can just kill things that your opponent didn't think they could kill. Worth having. It doesn't have to be in a ghost deck for her. Worth having a couple of her in some other decks if you can make the space. Banshee. Banshee's pretty much another auto include for me now. Sometimes you just got no way of killing a high value creature or high hit point creature. If you can ping it with a spell, with a free rider, with one of your 1/1 chuds, you can then drop a Banshee and kill it outright. 2 off, 3 off, every deck. Try it out before taking it out. If you can handle things otherwise, sure, but I definitely recommend you put in 2 Banshees minimum. Nightshade, native tag, 6 attack, which is good, 2 health, which is bad. But when Nightshade gains stealth, Inspire. So there's not a huge amount of ways to give her stealth. And again, Inspire obviously only works outside in natives, I should say. You can consider it. I think I ended up cutting her from my native deck, but it's not the. It does something, right? It does something different. Whether or not it's worth the cost, debatable. If stealth worked, then I might have a slightly better opinion of what stealth does. But at the moment, they can be targeted by spells and board wipes and stuff, so it doesn't really help. Broodmother Beast, 6 cost, 4/4, and you get 2 Spiderlings to your hand. So this is the 1/1 Spiderlings that we spoke about here. You wouldn't put them in your deck normally, but you'd be quite happy to see them off the Broodmother. So 4/4 stats for 6 isn't great, and you're then going to have to spend another 2 per spider that you want to put out. And so you'd have to be pretty sure that you had space to play them, because obviously if your opponent can just deal with them by pinging them away the next turn, not so good. It's okay. I definitely would put at least one of these in a beast deck, maybe 2. I don't think it's worth all 3 slots though. Ghost of Mariachi. Deploy you. No, deploy me. How dare you? Give friendly ghosts +1/+1, like Casper. 1/6. Sorry, joking there. 1/6 is okay, just to survive, but it's not give other friendly ghosts. I've actually never managed to play this. So if it immediately goes to a 2/7 itself, slightly better. And if you've got a ghost board, could also be beneficial. Maybe one of those in a ghost deck, but obviously not outside it. The Wendigo Beast, 5/5. Target enemy creature loses Fortify. There are Fortify decks out there, and sometimes Fortify is a pain in the ass, particularly with sort of lethal and when you're trying to kill some other high value pieces. Maybe see how the games go. If you're coming up against a lot of Fortify, a Wendigo is okay for the price and the ability. Brainwash, 6 cost spell. Convert the target enemy creature into 2/1 Adept. Not a Cultist Adept this time. I think that's 3 different ways they've written the Cultist Adept. But to put it in your side of the table. So you brainwash them, right? So one of their creatures becomes a 2/1 Cultist Adept on your side. I think this is probably one of at least the most straightforward way of dealing with sort of high value targets. Things that you can't kill in a winner. 6 cost, so sometimes you're giving up your whole turn, but you're getting a body on your side of the board as well. Definitely recommend starting with 2 of them in any deck that you're building, and maybe work around that depending on how your deck plays out. Banjo Man, Ghost, 4/4/6. Deploy, give target friendly creature +2/+0. Again, this is the kind of, anything you can, when you can do more damage to your enemy than they thought you could do, this guy's okay. The +2 that you give to a creature can immediately then go and attack, assuming it's on the board. Not brilliant, but worth thinking about depending on how your deck works out. The Hive, I've never played the Hive, but it's got an interesting ability. So 5/5 creature, and at the end of your turn, turn random adjacent creature into the Hive. So positioning, it's one of the few things that cares about positioning, right? So left and right. So on your turn, you can kind of adapt to that, and being able to change your 1/1 creatures into a 5/5 creature, pretty decent. You also just need to make sure this survives a turn, and depending on your deck and depending on how quickly you can rush out bodies, maybe the Hive's a way to change your low value bodies into high value bodies. And once you've got like 2 of these out, then your opponent has to deal with both of them in a turn, or you're just going to keep getting Hives. Fire Demon, 4/5, 6 cost. Deploy, give 1 damage to everyone. So that includes your side of the board and your heroes. I mean, it could be a finisher, right? But typically, if your opponent's got a massive board with weenies on it, you could get one of these out. It's a little bit expensive. There's other sort of board wipes you might want to consider, but mostly out of AG. So this is, whilst it hurts you as well, if you've got no other broad board removal, maybe putting one of them in to see how it works could be okay. I think it'd be better if it was give 2 damage to everyone. A lot of the sort of weenie rush things have 2 life rather than 1, and because it's also impacting your board, either you've played to a game state where this is beneficial for you, or kind of gets you out of jail a bit more. So I'd just rather see that be give 2 damage to everyone. The Dark Water Mermaid, even though I've started swearing, now we've got gratuitous nudity, get banned from YouTube. 1/8, so 8's out of danger zone mostly. It gives all friendly creatures +0/+1, and when it takes damage it turns into a Raging Mermaid. I actually don't know what a Raging Mermaid looks like. Oh, I can click on these. I don't know what the Raging Mermaid looks like. There's no way of seeing it. I've never seen it. Couldn't tell you if it's good or bad. Give it a try. Let me know how it goes. The Archer, native, 6 cost, 3/5. Definitely 3 of these in a native deck, and you might want to consider them in other decks because the deal 3 damage on deploy is pretty significant. Puts a body down, 3/5 body, and you can also get Inspire. So very useful in a native deck, but also useful. Well, the Inspire element's no good, but the 3 damage is useful in a lot of decks. 3 of those in a native deck. The Pukwudgie, assuming I'm saying that right, 5/6, pretty decent, pretty strong stats. The 6 is difficult to deal with. Lets you draw a card, and if it's a native it costs 2 less. So sometimes the card draw, good on its own. In a native deck, even better. You'd have 2 of these, 3 of these in a native deck definitely, and you could consider having them in other decks just because of the stats and the draw. The Blacksmith, 6 for a 5/4, knife and fork in your hand. Bit underpowered, I would say, for a 6. The fork +1 defense and the knife +1 offense. It's okay. I put it in a couple of decks to test where I'm just trying to increase my card advantage, but the cards it gives you, as I mentioned before, the virtual card advantage isn't great. A Chort, so a 10/10 for 6 seems great, until you get the Summon Chort's Heart. So what that does is puts a 0/4 excuse me, puts a 0/4 Chort's Heart out on the board, and if that Chort's Heart gets destroyed, then so does this guy. So what you really need is something like this guy down and Fortify, or something that makes sure your opponent can't attack you next turn, so you get a bit of value out of swinging with him. It's okay, but it's just not as good as it looks on paper. The Ozark Howler Beast, 4/1, increased spell damage by 1. Now, slight, same ability as the Gettysburg Ghosts from earlier. Bigger body, so it might stay around for longer, and can get you out of some tricky situations. So if you've got some sort of combo deck, so again, AG deck, Ancestral Guard and Beast, you could consider throwing this in to buff your spells rather than the 2-drop, just because this is going to be harder to deal with, but you're going to need more mana to drop this and your spells in the same turn. So if you can stall for long enough, it might be worth thinking about. The Mongolon Monster Beast, Onslaught, so that's I believe that's Trample. I've actually never used anything with Onslaught. Yeah, so all extra damage goes onto hero. 7 for a 5/5 with Onslaught. Seems reasonable. Beast tag. I'm not going to argue too much with the placement of that. Never used it, but you can certainly throw it in a deck. The Sinful Shepherd, 7 cost, 7/7, so you're already, that's your baseline. And as a deploy effect, turns all other creatures into 1/1 black cats. Now this is a good board wipe. You can set it up depending on how you want to do it. You can set it up where you've got a lot of creatures and they don't, or they've got a lot of creatures and you don't. Because sometimes having the black cats, if we go all the way back to here, the black cats are what they become, and last word, go back to your hand. So sometimes you can actually transform 5 or 6 of their cards into a black cat and wipe the board, goes back to their hand, and you fill their hand up and they can't draw. So it becomes very difficult to get rid of those black cats, and because when your hand's full, the card you draw just goes to the graveyard, you can't swap it out with anything. There's very few ways of getting rid of black cats once you have them, and paying 3 to have them out can be quite painful. So this is necessary as a board wipe. I'd suggest everybody puts in one of these, at least to see how it goes. You can only have one, which is why I'm saying one. And then try and make it work for your deck, right? Whether it's black cats for you or black cats for them, or share and share alike, one of the two. But it's one of the very few board wipes out of neutral. It's a global board wipe, of course, but you can kind of set it up to your advantage before you play her, whatever way you want to do it. I think this is the most I've talked at a time for a whole year, thanks to lockdown. Right, 7, Houndmaster. Deploy, give all friendly beasts +2/+2. 4/5, which is a reasonable body as well. In a beast deck, yes, you might want to consider this. Again, what I've been saying about the anything that does more damage than your opponent thought you could do in a turn can be advantageous. Worth trying this one. The Ghost Mustang. So again, root, does that mean you can root one of their guys, or that this card is rooted for a turn? Again, there's no point in the card being rooted for a turn because it can't attack on the turn that comes out anyway. So I presume it's one of theirs. For this price, you're wanting a root 3. Your attack's not very good. This is a stall. You're looking to stall, and if you're looking to stall at 7 cost, it's got to be better than root a single card. But I don't know if that's how it works. I don't know if it's root target enemy or not. Right, this Nagual. I presume it's Nagual actually. Not Nagual. Native, 7 cost, 4/4. All natives in your hand cost 1 less. Yeah, right. So part of my this one and whatever other ones that reduce the cost. This one. Now, this is conditional, right? But this is the level that you need ramp cards to be at. There's no point having ramp by the time you're towards the end of the game here. Or very little point in having ramp by the time you're towards the end of the game here. If it's turn 7 and this is your turn, you play this, and going forward, all the natives in your hand cost less. Now, by the time it's turn 7, you've maybe got, depending how your draw's gone, depending how your cards got, maybe you've got 6 cards, and maybe 5 of them are natives. So at best, this is reducing the cost of 5 other cards in your hand by 1. It's just not. It's not useful, right? This needs to be a 2-drop. You can drop his stats 1/1, and all natives in your hand cost 1 less. So in terms of ramp, that's where you want to. Things have to ramp up from the bottom to the top. There's no point ramping up from the top to the bottom. Now, unlike Hearthstone, there's no 10 mana cap in this game, and often games will go to turn 14, 15. So you might say, well, you're still only halfway through the game. Yes, but the further along the game you go, the less important I would say cost reduction is. Sometimes you always want more, right? And you never don't want things to be cheaper, right? But the problem is you can't put too much on the board because it'll get wiped out. So the balance between having cards in hand and cards on the board and cost reduction at this stage in the game is it's just not as good, right? If this was a 2-drop, 1/1, all natives in your hand cost 1 less. Yeah. Here, it's just unlikely you're going to get a lot of value from it. And it's not good enough otherwise. So, I've not put that in my native deck. Don't think it's worth it. Right, Spectre Ghost 3/9. It's just the next level for those deploy, attack creature multiple times until one of them dies. Worth having. Good in ghosts, good in anything else as well. It's an okay 7-drop. If you can, you've got the slots, go for it. The Ritual Master, Cultist, 7-drop, 6/6, already pretty good. But it's got the additional ability of summon 2 random cultists at the end of your turn. Now this is very good. You can put this in. It's one of the few things that really ramp up your board advantage. Now it can still be wiped out relatively easily with board wipes, but if it's not answered in a couple of turns, and you particularly if you're in a cultist deck where you can buff the things that are coming out, this is very good. But it's actually very good in pretty much any deck. And anytime you're up against not Ancestral Guard, people are going to struggle to deal with you putting out 3 bodies on turn 7 in addition to whatever else you already had. So 2 of these, 3 of these. The only reason I'm saying 2 of these and not 3 of these is again the cost, right? I mean, if your hand's clogged up by these early doors, you'd be very sad. So it's just your mana curve you're thinking about there. But I would play 3 of these and maybe scale back if it turns out you end up with too many cards in hand that you can't play. Then Voucher Beast 7, 4/4, gain +2/+2 every time another beast dies. Can be useful. You can drop this. Let's say you got a handful of beasts on the board. You can swing to clear the board. End up with quite a powerful Voucher. You can try it. It's not. Your opponent will typically play around it. Like if they can, and they can kill this before they kill anything else, they will. And so 7 for a 4/4 is not great. So it depends on your board state. What you're doing. If you've got a lot of fortifying as well, might be worth having. Something to think about. And it's not your side of the board either. Every time another beast dies. So if you're up against a beast deck as well, it can get out of hand quite quickly. This Forest Ghost, 8 cost. So we're in the 8 costers now. 4/4, summon 2 wolves. So if we go back to the wolves, which are here, you can trigger the deploy effect. Actually, would that work? Does that work? Now, I never tried this guy, but that might work, I guess. Because I'm pretty sure deploy effects trigger off summon. So you play this guy, and you end up with a board full of wolves. Yeah, that makes sense for 8. I never tried it. Maybe worth putting one in, see what happens. Again, you got to think about what your deck does. Like your board can be wiped very easily. Fire Spirit, 2 damage to everything, kills all your wolves. You've spent 8 for what will be a 4/2 creature at that point. Very easy to take care of. But if you need bodies on the board and you've got ways of buffing those, probably worth doing. Now, I don't know why this spell exists, right? Or this card exists. So, Purge, 8 costs, destroy all natives. Now, I don't know if once Totem's working, natives are going to be so outrageously powerful that they need a dedicated removal card for them. But if this is... I mean, this should be potentially an option for every deck, right? So maybe for 8, destroy all creatures of one type. And there you can choose Beast or Ghost or Cultist or something. As a board wipe for 8, this is just too niche because natives aren't being played that much at the moment anyway. I would just make it the single card and I'd make it flexible because there's not enough slots and there's no side decking. So destroy all cards of one type, and you choose it at the time you play it. For 8 would be a good... It's a costly board wipe. If your opponent's playing a mixed deck, it's not going to hit everything. And yeah, so change that from natives to creatures of one type. And include your own, right? So, it hits you as well. Well, it doesn't have to for 8, I suppose, but if you need to tone it back a bit, you could have it hit both sides of the board. It'd be a global effect. Right, Voucher Beast. 8 cost, 6/6. Costs 1 less for every card in your hand. This card comes out turn 2, and it's super hard to deal with on turn 2. Like a 6/6, when you've only got 2, maybe 3 mana, is nigh on impossible. Now, I don't know why it's got nunchucks, but let's not argue about it. Excuse me. This can fit into anything. If you're thinking about your curve, right, and you let's say there's no 1 cost or 2 cost cards, or very few 1 cost or 2 cost cards that really gel with your deck, you should definitely have 3 of these, because by the time turn 2, turn 3 comes along, you're playing this for 2 mana, and it's just super hard to deal with. So, Beast deck, 100% 3 of these. Any other deck, consider 2 or 3 of these. The Fogman. 8 costs, 6/7, okay stats. Deploy friendly creatures, gain stealth. So everybody else will gain stealth. Now if stealth worked, maybe it's worth it. At the moment, it doesn't work. Fairly pointless. But if there's cards you've got to keep alive, for some sort of late game shenanigans, you have them out, you Fogman it up, and your opponent can't target them. Seems okay, just doesn't work properly at the moment. The Furious Yeti, 8 costs, 6/7, again okay stats, and a misspelled Onslaught. It's a bit basic. 8 cost for, what was the other Onslaught guy that we looked at? 7 cost for 5/5, so 8 cost for 6/7. Yeah, I mean, if we think Onslaught's worth that, because I suppose you could go through a 1/1 without much damage and put 5 on the opponent. Particularly Fortify decks, I suppose, good against. Don't know why it's not a beast, but that's fine. Maybe if you're struggling for finishers, maybe worth thinking about putting that in the deck. Then you've got your big Treant, 9 cost for 8, okay stats, and this is roots all enemies. So this is fine. This is like a stall for a turn. I think you can only have 1 of these, but stall for a turn, and but 9 costs, so you're already quite late in the game. You got to have something that you want to be doing the next turn. But something that, roots all enemies, I think's a good ability. I think there should be more rooting tooting, sharpshooting in the game. But this is okay-ish. I can't think. There's not much cause for stall decks at this point, right? There's nothing bigger than a 9 that's going to really turn the game around for you. So maybe this should be on a slightly smaller body. Maybe reduce the stats, reduce the cost, to make this worthwhile. The Titan Boa Beast, 9/7/7 Onslaught. Yep, fine. I think we've established that's pretty much the curve for Onslaught. It's okay. I've never used it. I've never had Onslaught really win a game for me. So if it works, if that's your finisher, then put in 2 or 3 of them. And the big boy, 10 Overseer Ghost. Pretty common. 10 for a 10/10. I mean, if you're struggling, yeah, there's no conditions on it. It's a hard one to get rid of on its own. And if you got any other benefits, maybe you could have played 3 of the Ghost cost reducers, and that would come in for 7 on turn 8. So it's okay. I think I'm going to wrap it up there as my voice is giving out. I'm going to come back and do the other 4 factions as well. There's actually fewer cards in each of the factions, so I'll be able to run through all of them in a single video as well. But I'm going to just wrap that up there. Hopefully that's given you some thought about how I view these cards and when you're trying to put them in. Now what we need to think about, of course, is how they fit into each of the factions. So the factions all have access to the sort of neutral cards as well. And not every deck's going to want everything. I'll just highlight again the cards that you should be thinking about playing. The ones that you need to be playing are the Offering. You need 3 of them, unless you're AG, in which case you still probably want them. You want a couple of Banshees. You want a couple of Brainwashes, and you want a Sinful Shepherd, and maybe start thinking about some of these. So the Owlbear, the Ritual Master, the Dark Priest, and the ones with Frenzy. So the Fanatic, the Combat Cultist, and the Burning Cow. All things to think about as well. And that's just things to think about in any deck. They kind of fit into some things better than others, but definitely try and fit some of those in. If you're building a new deck, you can start with that as a rough base, and then fit your other cards in around that per faction. Just because, and actually, you know what? I'm gonna throw Hanged Lady in there as one of the other ones to consider, right? So not necessary, but other ones to consider. Cool. Right, so I'll come back with the other ones. Video part 2. Try and go through the decks in the same video. Like I say, there's far fewer cards in the faction specific. And let me know if my evaluations of any of these cards are wrong. If you've got any ideas for what those cards should look like, and I'll check out the comments and hopefully improve my decks from there. So until next time, this has been NFT Decree, signing off.